Welcome! This is Her Identity Project, a safe space for women to explore faith, self-discovery, and personal growth. Here we will journey together to become our best whole selves, spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally. It's time to let go of everything that is holding you back from becoming the woman God created you to be. If you're ready to reclaim your authentic self, stick around. I'm your host, Ashley Iduda, and this is Her Identity Project. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is Her Identity Project podcast. I'm Ashley Iduda, and I'm here with my guest today. I'm here with Holly Berger. Holly, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What I want to do is just have you introduce yourself. That way I don't flub up anything. So just tell us who's Holly and where do you live, if you're comfortable sharing that information. And I want to do a deep dive, of course, about all the exciting things you're up to these days. So definitely tell us, what you do and things like that.
Okay. Well, I was just talking to someone and I was like, how do I answer these questions concisely? Because these are, my world is spirituality and I love to talk about it. So I'm going to be as concise as I can. My name's Holly Berger, and thank you so much for having me on, Ashley. I'm really excited about this. I love talking to you. We've had some conversations online, and I just think that it's going to be good stuff.
Yeah.
So I identify as an artist. I always call myself an artist. And but what I do mostly is I do spiritual readings. And I mostly work on referral. I rarely advertise. And I do that just because I kind of joke that my advertising agent is God. And I just let God take care of it because it's always worked that way for me. The times that I have put money into advertising, my background was in marketing in the old days, like in the 80s, where you did newsletters and things were a little different without the internet. But I know how to hit the ground running and create and get people to listen and join in and all that. But every time I did things like that, I didn't get any clients. But in the beginning, when I started doing readings, people would refer people and it just snowballed. And I realized that I didn't know how to do what I was doing. So I had to give up the reins and stop doing things the way I thought they should be done.
Yeah.
And check in a lot with my high self, with my prayers and my meditations, and follow energy. I had to stop using my head and start using my heart. So I've always been an artist since I was very little. I've made something. I have a lot of creative energy, and I joke that if I don't use it, it uses me, and it's not very nice. So I'm always making something. You can see my artwork up there. That's my latest venture, which is called Neurographica. And it's a type of artwork that you do to open up your neural pathways. It's very healing and it's kind of miraculous, if you ask me. So I've got a whole adventure going with that. And I write. I've got 2 published books. I've got a website, and people are welcome to look me up on Facebook under my name, Holly Berger, and also on Instagram under Holly Berger. And then my website is lightworkersalliance.com.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there, and I do want to the more chat progresses. And I love that you finished by using the term light worker, because ever since I met you, I was really eager to have this conversation because for me okay, so I guess I should back up and kind of introduce myself a little more. But so I identify as more of a Bible-based Christian. And so it's interesting to me because when we first met, I was really open and I had kind of talked about how I had this spiritual encounter with Jesus. And it meant so much to me because you were actually, I would say, one of the only people who went out of your way to say well, be proud of that and go, like
Wow.
whatever God's calling you to do through that, like do it. So that, first of all, that meant a lot to me. So I just want to like thank you for the encouragement I feel like you've always had since I've known you. But so the term light worker is new to me. I really don't know what that even means. And it's funny. So I know, I went on a trip to New Orleans with my husband and my brother. And in the car on the way there, we had all kinds of like spiritual chats. And I was looking up like on TikTok or whatever, like what's a light worker? And I was seeing like all these stupid videos and I like couldn't actually find a definition or like anyone to like concisely fill me in on that. And so when I go to your Facebook page, I see you call yourself a spiritual seeker or a soulful seeker and a light worker. So please like shed all the light, pun intended, on like what is that?
There's so much stigma around verbiage, you know.
Yes.
So I just turned 60 and I'm proud of being 60, so I don't mind if people know. But
Yeah,
a
you
lot of
look
my verbiage,
incredible. You should.
thank you.
Yeah, your curls look great too.
So do yours, honey.
Hmm. Thank you.
Thanks. I washed my hair today. You said to be camera ready, so
Yeah, we
just
both
wanted to
did.
confirm.
Freshly washed. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of my verbiage is older. Like for instance, one thing like in the 80s and 90s, the word psychic was sort of like a bad word. And the word
Mm,
medium was only used if you hear dead people. And now medium is used if you do readings. People say mediumship and medium, and it always catches me because I never know what words to use. And honestly, I do ask people how, like, if they say, what do you do? I say, how'd you hear about me? Because how they heard about me is how someone perceived me. And that perception tells me what they know about me and maybe what they want to know. And I try to get them to ask me questions because I don't even know what I am. I don't know what I do. So I work with light and light comes from, I believe it comes from God. And I believe God is a non-binary entity. Not, it is masculinity and femininity, and it is pure light, what I call Christ consciousness light. And Christ consciousness light, by definition, is a term that comes, it's pre-Bible. So if you I love the history of the Bible. I love the Bible. I love Christianity. I love all religions. I love the seed root of all goodness. You know, if something's evil, then I don't want anything to do with it. But if you
yeah.
go back to the roots of the Bible, the Bible was written. I mean, what we currently follow is basically written by King David and his minions. So it was written after it was spoken forever. You know, how many years was it spoken? I think like 400 years or something like that. I forget. And
Yeah.
previous to the Bible, we have, really old religions like Hinduism and Buddhism and Judaism. Those are all thousands and thousands of years old. So when you look at Christos light, Christos is a Greek term that means haloed or light around their head. And
Okay.
people who carried God light, back in the old days, they could see it and they said they were Christos. So that's how Jesus was called Christed, is because people said he was haloed or had light around him. So
Yeah.
Christ consciousness light comes from that terminology. It comes from Greek and probably some, the Bible is Greek and Aramaic and Hebrew and who knows how many languages. So we have mixtures of that funnel of whatever it becomes now in our language. So Christ consciousness light has a currency though. It has a currency of, and I keep doing this because I think of it as vertical. So I think of myself as grounded to the core of the earth and connected to the I am presence. So God, creator, source, I am presence, to me, that's all the same thing. In between us, so in between the I am presence and me, God and me, is another light that I call the high self, or some people call it an oversoul light. And that is what I believe is sort of like the directive of your life. So sometime around 2000, I had a lot of spiritual curiosity. I was very into Native American medicine and I was into learning all about religions. I've always considered myself a Christian.
Yeah.
I around 2000, I started having I always heard things, even as a child, I heard things in my head, but I just thought it was crazy. I really thought I was schizophrenic and I was going to end up in a padded room somewhere. But what I
Really?
discovered is, yeah, I did. I thought it was crazy.
Like, how old were you when you heard things?
Um, I I heard things weird. I heard weird things. It wasn't like, beautiful poetic things. I don't have like some beautiful story of, tell
Yeah,
your aunt she has lung cancer and she catches it early and lives. I always heard my name called all the time. I would be like, what? And then no one would be there. I would see things out of the corner of my eye. I would see the overlay of people on other people. I think I'd see
really?
someone and then I'd look and it wouldn't be them. I would see like things in trees and then they wouldn't be there. I always had like some perception of another world, but it
Wow.
was crazy making for me. It wasn't happy. And I tried to drown it out with drugs and alcohol when I got older. I hated it. And then
Yeah,
I literally screamed at God and said, I have kids to raise when I was in my 30s. And I was like, leave me alone because I didn't know what it was. And it
yeah,
wasn't all good. It wasn't all
right.
Christ consciousness. So this is the way I equate it. If you're clairaudient, which is the ability to hear outside of, your regular voice box, if you're clairaudient and you turn it on, it's like turning on a radio station. So you don't
Yeah,
know what station it's on. You have to learn to attune it to the radio station you want. So I started hearing chaos. I started hearing like it would sound like I was in a train station or a busy airport. I would go into buildings and I'd be like inundated with chaos all the
yeah,
time.
the
All,
sounds and the noises of all the people. Could
yeah.
you hear other people's thoughts?
Um, Occasionally I would hear other people's thoughts, but that is something that early on you learn to block because it's
Okay.
really annoying.
Yeah.
It's not,
And
people are
yeah,
like, can you read people's minds? And I'm like, not if I can help it.
yeah, you don't
No.
want to.
Yeah, it's like the least entertaining thing. People think it's a way to know things. It's not. It's a way to know people's fears and their grocery lists. That's what people think about.
Yeah. Oh, I believe it. Yeah, because we have something like 400 negative thoughts a day or something like that. And so most
We
of
have,
it's
yeah,
going to be negative.
science
Yeah.
says we have like 15 thoughts a second. They take it down to bits. And my guides have taught me all kinds of stuff. I mean, that's why we can't manifest because we have too many thoughts.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so right around 2000, I started meeting some people. Well, my youngest child is my daughter. I have two stepsons and a daughter.
Okay.
And she turned 18. And remember, I yelled at God and said, I need to raise my kids. She
Yeah.
turns 18. Like 2 days later, I meet someone that helps me clear out everything that's interfering and get in touch with my guides. I didn't know that
Wow.
I didn't know that's what he was doing, but that's what he was doing. So all of a sudden I can hear things. And he has this group. He's a channel, which I was like, I don't know what this channeling stuff is, but I don't have any interest in it. My friend made me go. I was like, what? She said, you can ask questions. I'm like, I don't have any questions, which was a lie. I have a million questions. I'm all about the questions. But I went and people would ask questions and I would hear the answers before he said them. And I was like, this group
Wow.
is really weird. So
Wow.
I told him that. I told him and he's like, I'm like, is that what happens when people come here? He's like, no, that's not what happens.
Oh my
So
gosh.
he
Yeah.
made me see that I had a gift. And then I learned a meditation technique that helped me work in my pillar of light so that I'm protected. What psychic
Oh,
people do is we feel inundated and so we take our flame, which should be in a pillar of light, and we take it down into a little peanut to protect ourselves. And then we start
mhm.
checking in all around to make sure we're safe. And it drains us. We get
Yeah.
too empathic. We just start checking things that don't matter instead of using our light to protect us, asking our guides to protect us, calling in our angels and working in our pillar of light and utilizing Christ consciousness light the way it's supposed to be utilized. We
So
do it
sorry, I'm
backwards.
gonna I'm gonna interrupt you because I feel like now I have lots of questions. So does everybody have Christ conscious light or it's a gift you have?
No, every single person, well, I shouldn't say every single person, because every soul that comes from our creator is we're born of Christ consciousness light. But we go through what some people
Yeah.
call veils to come to earth. You know, we're from another worldly place, which you can call heaven or whatever you want to call it. You know, if you're not Christian, you're probably not going to call it heaven. I guess some religions do, but it's still the same frequency. What, you know, you can call it something else.
So it makes sense to me, but I'm gonna just be bold and ask you a question that I think other Christians listening might ask you. Like, to me, when someone says they're a Christian, I I believe that means that you believe Jesus like died for, you know, for he suffered, right? So that we could live. Like, you believe that he died and rose again, and that the Holy Spirit came to live in your heart when he rose to heaven. So
So
is
I would
that
rephrase that. I wouldn't say I believe exactly what you said. I would rephrase it because
right?
what you're using English and you're using terms that have morphed. So what I believe is that whatever he was called, Yahweh, Jesus, his name was not
Sure.
Jesus, that individual, which I consider to be an ascended master, that he was born on this planet
Yeah.
knowing his awareness of the I am presence, which he called his father, and
Yes.
we all have the
Okay.
same father. And
Yes.
so he went about telling people, you're the son of God, I'm the son of God, we're all the son of God. And
Yes.
he went about trying to rectify the wrongs of humanity and to save people and help people. And he learned to attune himself to Christ consciousness light in himself, and it came through his hands, and he was able to heal. And he did the best he could. But he didn't come and say, I'll die for your sins. He did the best he could, and he was murdered because of his empowerment. You know, the Romans were afraid of him, and they made an example out of him. Everything
Yeah.
that happened that we write about is there's stories that we put upon him. We say he died for our sins. So what it means is, like, if your neighbor puts a fence up around their yard and protects their animals, their dogs and their cats or whatever, and you say he protected his animals, the neighbor didn't live to do that, to teach you that. He just happened to do it, and you learned from it. You learned from him. You know, anytime we learn something from somebody, you know, we can proclaim that they taught us that. But Jesus was a very simple teacher. And
Yeah.
that's I mean, all the stories tell you that. If you look into them, they all tell you the same thing, which is that he wanted us to love one another and not judge each other. That would and his main frequencies were compassion and mercy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I believe.
Okay.
It's
Gotcha.
just a little bit, my verbiage is a little bit different because I feel like sometimes we get attached to a story, and then we make the story our mantra, and then we look at other people and we say that's not their story, they're different than me, and therefore they're wrong and I'm right. And we have to be very
Yeah,
careful with.
we do. And that's why I don't know how to word this properly. It's been an interesting journey for me to start this podcast because my beliefs are different from yours, right? And I think that's beautiful, and I think that's okay. And I'm not here to judge you. I mean, that's why I said, what do you believe? Just to have you clarify it so that I can
Yeah.
understand like your frame of references when you're saying certain things, because I believe that Jesus died on the cross, and I believe that the Holy Spirit lives in my heart to guide me and to comfort me. And you, I can't remember the word you used, but you did have your own terminology. I think it was a type of light in between yours and the I am. You named like another light here.
Oh, the high self.
Yeah. So to me, that is the Holy Spirit, right? So it's like we all kind of believe the same thing. We just have like different terminology for it in a way. I'm not going to say that because I think diehard Christians who are listening, who truly believe that Jesus was a gift from God and that he did die for us, like this conversation would probably raise hell if they were listening to us. You know what I mean? So there's definitely going to be like those types of people, right? But I'm not afraid of that. I think that when I started this podcast, my goal was to help people explore their faith, you know? And I think
Yes.
that I've learned a lot because when I first wanted to do this, um, proclaiming Jesus and his life was so important to me because of my own personal experiences with him. You know, I mean, all I can do is speak for myself. And I know that, like, in my heart, he's real because he's come to me and made himself. I mean, I hugged him, like, he was like very present. And so I've just had so many personal experiences that I could really like never deny his presence. And I think that he's saved my life in a lot of ways. And so I was on a mission and I am on a mission to just help people explore their faith, you know. I'm not saying what I think is right or wrong. It's just what I believe and it's my personal experiences that I would never want to go back to the life I lived before I was made new in Christ because it was full of darkness and I was depressed and I was confused and I was checking out with drugs and alcohol, just like you mentioned, not for the same reasons, but for other reasons. I think I had pain and childhood trauma and these things that I had never dealt with. Um, so yeah, so thanks for being open and just like having this conversation. So let's jump into sacred geometry because that is also like new terminology for me. And I had a guest actually on the show, and I'm not even. It's not about her being a believer, but I'm not sure she even believes in God. You know, we didn't really go there, but um, what's my point here? She was talking about like the third like 3D and 4D, and I've heard people talk about like 5D. And so I think you're probably a perfect person to like delve into that and explain it if that is even like is what sacred geometry is. Clearly
It,
another topic like I don't know anything about. So I was
I'll give you,
curious to hear
I'll give
you
you a
talk
quick
about
rundown that can really help you understand the dimensions.
it. Yeah.
So the first dimension is rocks and dirt. The
Okay.
second dimension is, this is science. The second dimension is animals and plants. The third dimension is humans. So the humans on Earth are in the third dimension. The fourth dimension is the astral field. So if you die and you don't go with God, you don't return to your creator, you can get stuck in the astral field. There's a lot of spiritual energy, and I always recommend that people never deal with the astral field. And the fifth dimension is heaven. So that's what the easy terminology is. There are other
Oh,
dimensions beyond the fifth, but that's the easiest way to understand it. So when people talk about fifth dimensional frequencies or working with the fifth dimension, they're talking about working with Christ consciousness light or working with God. And when they talk about the third dimension, they're talking about where you drive your car, where you make your dinner, where you live your life right now. So as souls, we go back to the fifth dimension when we die. We return to our creator. So
so
I,
interesting to me. I'm going to stop you just for conversation's sake. So, like, when I
okay.
became a Christian, I was taught, and I do believe that, you know, we are a spirit being who lives in a body with a soul, and our soul is our mind, our will, and our emotions. So, it's interesting because there's some differences there, but to me, the spirit beingness, like, does seem like the fourth and fifth dimension because I believe that when I die, I mean, I'm a spirit now, but when I die, what dies is my body. So my
Mhm.
spirit's here today and it's still going to be here forever. And that's when I'm in heaven, I just simply lose my body, right? And so I think that it's so interesting to compare and contrast. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, it is so interesting. So there's a lot of, again, we have the terminology thing because So this is what happens is that I learn things from what my guides tell people in sessions and what I ask questions in meditation, and I don't like, I only open up conversations with my guides when I'm in sacred space. So I do a very specific prayer, and I go to a very specific energy. I don't randomly talk to them, because that's the way, if you're randomly talking to a spirit, you don't know who it is. And that's a way for dark energy to come in. So I'm really specific about how I work with Christ consciousness light, and that I work with Christ consciousness light. I don't want to work with anything less. But what they've told me is that what comes from God is our soul. And that when God initially split, God split into 6 parts, and each of those 6 parts split into a masculine and feminine part. And if you look at a flower of life, this is so interesting that you have started this conversation and that it leads to
Yes.
this. If you look at a flower of life, I printed these things off, so hopefully they'll show up. So this is a flower of life. In the
I
center,
see
you can
it.
see there's a circle. Can you see it?
Yes.
And then it creates this flower here. So if you imagine God is here, and then this is a soul, and it creates this, or this is a, let's see. Yeah. So it creates this little flower petal here. And if you go out and out and out with this, it creates what's called the flower of life. So I don't know if you can see all the little circles in there that make the flowers. So
Okay.
as you have a soul, when the body is formed, which happens through science, it happens through a cellular, regeneration, or whatever you want to call it. What they've told me before is, in order to get the soul to stick to the body, you need a spirit. So when
Huh.
you die, the body goes back to earth, the spirit goes to the Akashic records, or a record keeping place, and the soul goes back to God. And I believe in reincarnation, some people don't, but the soul can reincarnate. But if you look at this flower of life, you can start seeing how our souls can like spread out and spread out and spread out and spread out, and have this whole lineage that goes all the way back to creator, and can have lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. The same way we have bloodlines, we can have archetypal lines. And it's
Wow.
absolutely fascinating. But
It's
if you come at it
fascinating.
from, yeah, so if you come at it from another angle, which is through geometry, through science, and through
Hmm.
mathematics, you can take this and look at the bigger circles, the darker circles. And
Yes.
then this becomes an overlay just using those circles. And if you add all these lines to it, and this is all over the internet, sacred geometry, you can look it up. This is called Metatron's cube. Metatron was the right hand of God, an archangel. And
Okay.
Metatron is very popular in metaphysics for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of people called ascended masters that are considered people who have lived lifetimes and have ascended the frequencies to Christ consciousness light, and they now help us on earth. So they're archangels and ascended masters, and they're all helpers for us. So within the flower of life, there are 5 shapes that are called platonic solids. And the platonic solids, I couldn't get a very good picture of them, but the first one is a cube. And then the other one is a tetrahedron. So if you know what a Star of David is?
Yeah.
So if the Star of David is 3D, it's a pyramid. So the pyramids have a square bottom.
Right.
So that's an actual pyramid. If it has a triangular bottom, it's called a tetrahedron.
Okay.
So if you have a tetrahedron, so it's got a triangular bottom and a point at the top, and then you have another one that has a triangular top and a point at the bottom, and you put them together, they create a star tetrahedron.
Okay.
And that's
Yeah.
a very important shape in metaphysics and in Judaism and in Christianity as well. But that shape is it's in the Metatron's cube, which also within the flower of life, you will also find the tree of life from the Kabbalah. So you will find, starting with the cube and then going to the tetrahedron, and then the other shapes are an eight-sided shape, which is the octahedron, and then a 12-sided shape, which is the dodecahedron, and then a 20-sided shape, which is the icosahedron. So those are
Wow.
the 5 solids: the cube, the tetrahedron, the octahedron, the dodecahedron, and the icosahedron. That's science, and that is what sacred geometry is.
And like what like okay, to like how does this relate to like why do I need to know this? How does it help a
It,
person? What like
it's
why?
what's when you begin to ask yourself, what am I made up of? What is my journey about? And you go into any type of historical references, you will find overlays of this information. And
Okay.
you can go into the flower of life from the Kabbalah in Judaism, and the flower of life has it has circles on it, and I didn't find a good picture that I could produce here. But again, all over the internet. These these are what we're made up of. These are in ourselves. This is a cellular representation of every single
Oh,
person, every human, I should say, that
okay.
we're made up of this sacred geometry. And it's a way to see our path to the light. And if you so sometimes when I'm doing a session for somebody, I will see the star tetrahedron, and I'll see these lines, and I'll see one that's not connected, and I'll know that they have a wounding there and that something needs healing. And I'll ask the guides, can you heal that? What's to be done about that? I'll ask them how, why they're showing me that. And people will get healings. They don't even know what it is. They just launch into their next thing, because we want to create, or we want something, or we want to do something, or we want to grow. And there's things stopping us. And we can say, oh, it was my bad childhood, or it was this memory, or this wounding, or this hospital visit. But if some way that gets erased from your memory banks, from your subconscious, really, if it can be erased or healed or rectified, you don't go back and say, oh yeah, this is how this happened and this is how it got healed. You just push it out of the way and launch into your life.
Great.
So it's a matter of this is what I do for work. I try to identify anything that I can identify based on someone's own intentions. I always ask people to set up their own intentions. I will not go in and tell you what's wrong with you. I will not tell you what the guides say. If you say, what's my random message? They will always say, you're loved. And they'll just give you some like really encouraging, loving message. And people are like, yeah, that's helpful, but how do I apply that to the third dimension?
Right.
You have to ask, you have to know exactly what you want fixed. If you tell the guides to come over and do something in my house, fix it up, and they paint your house, and you say, I didn't want my house painted. And they say, well, that's the most obvious thing to us. You say, but what about the landscaping? And they say, we didn't know you wanted us to look at the landscaping. It looks fine to us. So I always ask for people to tell me where they want to go, what's wrong, because that thing may be irrelevant to me or
Yeah, it
to the
makes
guy.
sense. If you're hung up on something and they fix something else, then you're still
Yeah.
gonna walk around being like, yeah, but this thing, this pain in my
Yep.
side or whatever. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes
And you're
sense to me.
disappointed.
Yeah.
You can get really
Yeah.
disappointed. Yeah. So they taught me that early on. Don't trespass. And the way they taught me that is, well, they didn't teach me. They had a client that I had. She was a really amazing healer. She was a massage therapist, but energy came through her hands, and she was just a beautiful healer. And she had a patient that she couldn't heal. And she said, I don't know what to do about it. And they said, what does the patient want? And she said, what do you mean? They said, well, let's just say someone comes to you with cancer, and what they want is a good night's sleep. What they want is an hour of peace. And you're
Yeah.
concentrating on healing their cancer, they're going to leave disappointed.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh my gosh. And so she reoriented her whole business to stop being about what she thinks someone needs to heal,
Yeah.
and to ask them, what would you like to work on today?
Hmm.
You know, maybe the
Yeah.
cancer patient wants to work on their relationship with their sibling or something. You don't know. You
You
have to
don't
ask.
know. Yeah. That's fascinating. How interesting. Okay, so you have this beautiful, like neurographic art behind you. And so I'd love for you to talk about that as well. Um, I had never heard of that, and I was kind of in a confused, like transitional place in my life over the summer. I was kind of doing some like healing of my own, and I was kind of like just searching for whatever could help me. and I did come across something, I think it's the same thing. And so of course, I didn't do it at first. Like I bought the ladies program and didn't try it and was like beating myself up for not doing it. And then I finally jumped in and like gave it a whirl. I completed about, I mean, one drawing. And what I found fascinating about it, well, like I wouldn't use the word fascinating, but I just really enjoyed what is it? Creating the corners or like doing, what do you call it?
Oh, rounding.
Rounding, which she kept
Yeah,
saying, like, this is not about enjoying the rounding. Like she was like,
yeah.
that's not what this is. But for people who have never heard of this, like like they don't know anything about it. So, I mean,
Mhm.
what is neurographic art? What's the benefits of it? And I love the topic because it has a lot to do with rewiring our brain
Yeah,
and mindset and things like that, neuropsychology. So I can kind of
yes.
geek out on this topic even though I'm not super knowledgeable about it. So,
So the beginning, I'm pulling up my website right now so I can get some exact verbiage for you. The beginning started for me when I was sick about a year ago. And
oh,
I have a weird thing with my system, and that weird thing is that I get kidney stones.
aw,
And it's I get them like the most kidney stone attacks I've had in a year has been 15. So I was at one
wow,
point really, really sick, and I'm much better
aw,
now, but
thank God.
it's a very rare and weird thing, so it's been difficult getting help. But I have got some help, and if anybody wants to know what it is, they can send me an email and I'll tell you all about it. But it's very specific to people who are stone makers. Most people get stones because they are dehydrated or, some other reason. I'm
Yeah,
not dehydrated, and I get stones because of an issue with my blood. So long story, but anyway, so I had a kidney
okay.
stone, and I'm an artist, and I've had many kidney stones. I know exactly how to take care of myself. I can keep myself out of the ER. I make them and pass them. They're not usually big, but I've had a lot of them. So my body gets really sick, even though they're small. So I'm miserable. I'm on drugs. I try not to talk to people because of the drugs I have to take make me really stupid.
Aw,
And I just, have tried to get, when I know I'm getting them, I just get all kinds of stuff. Like I put food in the freezer all the time. I do that. And I try to have art supplies. So I grab my art supplies. I'm looking for something to draw on YouTube, and I come across neurographica. So there's neurographic art and there's neurographic, and neurographic art is sort of the general category. Neurographica is a trademarked. Um, yeah, okay. So I just read this, and I don't even know where I read it. But Neurographica has an institute, and it's called like the Institute of Psychology, and it's out of Russia. And
huh.
the guy's name is Russian, and that's what I was just going to look up, and I don't have it right here. I'm sorry about that. But what I did find was I found somebody who taught classes, and I took classes with her. But while I was sick, I did a drawing, and it was fun. I didn't listen to all of the rules. There's 8 rules. I didn't listen to the rules. I was sick, and I was, falling asleep and waking up, and just did what I wanted. But it made me do it again. The second time I did it, I was like, oh, they do this. And the third time I did it, I was like, something kept pulling me back to it. The third time I did it, I felt energy shift. I followed their rules. I watched an actual video of, do this, the 8 steps. I followed the rules, and I felt something shift in me. And I was like, this is weird. This is why is this drawing making energy shift in me? And so I started doing more specific exercises. So they have certain drawings, like they have a tree, and they have I can't think of the word, but anyway, I met this person. I didn't meet her. I found her online, and her website is neuroartproject.net, and her name's Anchi Howard. She's German, but she lives in the US. And so I took a class with her after that, and it just blossomed in me. And they have levels of certification. So their first certification is a specialist, which means use neurographica and their technique in your work, but you can't teach it. And then they have a teacher certification, which I chose not to go to the teacher certification because I don't want to, I already have a business. I want to use it in my business. I don't want to teach people how to do it. So I work with clients now. I use this in every session, and I'll show you something funny. These are my session notes, which used to be in notebooks, but now they're on pieces of paper. So this is from maybe, I don't think this goes. So there's one that goes back to March, but these are all drawings, and look how many there are.
Wow.
So all drawings. So I draw for every session, and then I send people pictures and I go over what I see in the drawing. Sometimes I don't know what the heck it means. Well, I did a
Really?
session yesterday. Yes, I did a session yesterday, and I told the guy, I'm like, I really don't know what all this means, but, and he goes, I do. And he starts telling me about how he felt before we got on the call. And I love when people do this. This is my favorite thing, is when people say, I didn't even ask you, but you started talking about this, and then it cleared the thing that I was going to ask you about. So then I didn't even have to ask it. So it never came up, but that's what's in the drawing. And I was like, that is freaky. And that's why I love neurographica, because it dials into something in your brain. And so my ability to channel energy and to draw it is combined with how neurographica works, which is to change the neuroplasticity of your brain. And part of the
Yes.
way, you have an intersecting line and you round the corners and you color it in so that your brain doesn't stop. And all those lines are,
Ah,
so as you're, and there's a system to it. It doesn't work without the system. I can verify that because it doesn't work for me without the system. So
yeah.
yeah, so that's how I got hooked on it. So now it's just integrated into my world. And because, like all artists, I mean, I've been studying art my whole life. And one of the things I've learned is when you study with a great master, or somebody really good out in the art world, you should paint exactly like them. You should paint
Okay.
over and over. If you're learning something, some people are resistant. They don't want to paint like them. They don't want to be like them. But as long as you're in a class with them, paint and learn exactly what they're teaching you, because when you get away from that class, it will integrate into your own style and it will become how you do it. You're just
Yes.
learning what you need to learn from them. They're going to be a leaf on your tree. You're not going to paint like them. You're not going to draw like
Sure.
them. So
Yeah.
neurographica has become like that for me. So I started calling it neuroenergy art because it's integrated into my energetic work.
Ooh, I love that. Yeah, it is all integrated. How interesting. That's fascinating. So you are having quite an impact in people's life then. So in the beginning, we kind of talked about how you didn't know how to like identify yourself with regards to what you do. It sounds to me like you're a healer, right? Are we healing?
Well, I don't tell people I'm a healer because I feel like spirit does the healing. I'm just a
It's
channel.
not you.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
call myself a channel, an artist, an author, a writer, because I mean, I could say I've done healings, but you know, I just show up. I'm just like a pipe and the water runs through
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, you
I'm not the
are.
water.
Yeah, it's going through you. Yeah. I love that. So, tell us more about what your offerings are. Like, what impact are you wanting to make on the world? Like, I know that you're a fellow podcaster, so you have a podcast out there in the world. Tell us more about your podcast, more about, whatever else you have that you're excited about.
Well, to begin with, I will say that I've been really fortunate because since I started doing this work, I have been part of a team, me and my husband. And so I've never had to be like a single mom or the breadwinner of the family. And I've been able to say that I just work for God and I only do what I hear. And I've been in a safe environment to do that. I've had a home and, all of that. And I do have financial responsibilities, but the reason I say that is because everybody wants to do their light work. Everybody wants to work for God because they think it's easy. It's not easy. I threatened to work at Taco Bell so many times in the beginning because you're constantly clearing, you're constantly facing your issues, and you have to be able to just rise up to the fact that you're not flawless, that you're flawed, and that you're fake. My old teacher used to say that. He's like, if you feel like you're fake, just say you're fake and get over it. And I was like, oh, because you constantly fight it in your head. You're like, is that real? Is that really a voice? Is that really a guide? You have to get outside of all those doubts and to let the energy flow and be clear.
Yeah.
So it's a really weird juxtaposition of like, what are my offerings? My only offering, like across the board, my only offering is to be in service to the light. That's what I always say. I am in service to God's will, thy will be done. Or I
Amen.
say,
Yeah.
thy will is my will, thy will be done. So that's what I I do. But my guides will say that we are in a free will zone. We are in a free will world. And if you don't assert your will by saying what you want to do, there is no huge divine plan for us. Our plan is always to be clarified through light and to bring that light into the planet and to each other. For whatever wrongs were done, whatever fallen angels there are, whatever evil there is on the planet, light heals that. So if you
Yeah.
have to be a doctor or a vet or anything that you want to be when you're 4 years old or 10 years old, you can be, but it's free will. So my free will wants to be of service. My free will wants to talk to people and to share and to hopefully help people. And my free will wants to be an artist. So that's
Yeah.
my offerings. My offerings are always to do sessions for people, to do whatever art I'm working on currently, to write, because I feel that sometimes people can't get to what they want to get to. So I want to have literature out there that they can grab. I have a little prayer book and I have a big book of my story. And those are all available through my website. They're on Amazon. So that's my offerings. And I started a podcast. The podcast is called Your Spiritual Resource. Always since I started my website, when I first started channeling, and there was so much energy in me, it was like zapping all around all the time. And I said, how do I share this with the most people? And so I started a newsletter because it was pre-website.
Yeah.
Nobody had well, they were probably around, but I didn't know about them. And so I started a newsletter, and then that morphed into a website. And with the website, I did blogs and meditations. I did I've done Sunday morning free meditations for years. So there's a bunch of those on my website. I used to do a newsletter. I quit about 5 years ago, but I just sent one out this morning,
Ooh.
ironically. So I teach a meditation class, which I taught it for years, and the meditation class helps you hear your guides. It's all about being in touch with spirit. And I always tell my guides, I'll teach it if 3 people ask. And so 3 people hadn't asked me for 5 years. So I moved to Florida. I live in Florida now. I'm from Colorado,
Gotcha.
30
Okay.
years in Colorado. And so when I moved to Florida, I just went through this decompressing, and I thought maybe I was semi-retired. My husband's retired. So I'm like, we'll just kayak and vacation and I'll work part-time. But then all of a sudden, 3 people asked for my meditation class. And I was like, uh-oh. And then the podcast thing came across my desk. And then I was like, oh man,
Ah,
I'm going back to work.
back to work. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what's happened in the past 6 months is, and maybe just this past year, is that I have been called back you know, into work. And so I'm all for it. I'm happy to do it. And so I'm doing the podcast as a way for people to get spiritual lessons the way, so I can, if something profound happens in a reading, I can talk about it. I can share, parts of my book. I can interview amazing people that have readings, and I just want to share. For me, it's all about sharing.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I mean, I agree and I can relate to that too. I think it's beautiful being part of your journey, like getting to, start the podcast together and everything has been really cool. And I do believe that, you know, I think my beliefs are a little different than yours, but I do believe that God has a calling and a plan for our life, and that we have to stay connected to the source to know if we are in alignment with his will. and it's energy. You can feel it. When you're in alignment, it flows, right? And you
Yeah.
experience joy. And when you're not, you know it because it's all of these opposite emotions that happen, when you're not in alignment. I can only speak for me personally, but anytime I've not been in alignment, I end up getting like panic attacks and stuff. And it's so
Oh, wow.
funny looking back at my life in different seasons where maybe like I had a boyfriend that wasn't the right fit for me, or I was working in an industry that wasn't the right fit for me, or whatever. So yeah, I think when God calls and kind of gives us what I say like a download, it's important to be
Mhm.
obedient to his will. And so, that's when things work out, because if he brings us to it, then he'll help us get through it. So congratulations with everything going on with you. And I think that you can help so many people by introducing them to all this amazingness you're doing. So tell us one more time where we can reach you.
On my website, lightworkersalliance.com. My podcast is Your Spiritual Resource. And Holly Burger, Burger, just like a hamburger, on Facebook and Instagram.
Love
People
that.
always want to spell it differently. They don't want to make me a hamburger, but I am.
That's so cute. Yeah, I was double checking your name this morning and I went, oh, like a burger.
Yeah,
Easy to remember. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed our time together.
Thank you. You're amazing. And I love your light and I love your story and I can't wait to see what happens.
Aw, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Oh my gosh, thank you for listening. If you got something out of this episode, be sure to follow or subscribe to Her Identity Project on your favorite podcast platform. Make sure you're notified about new episodes. Please hit the like, the share buttons, get on social media, spread the word. Please take time to leave me a review. That would mean more to me than you could ever know, and it helps get eyes on this show so that other people can just get all the goodness out of it. If you're loving it, please hit me up in my DMs. I absolutely want to hear your feedback. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time.